The four Democrats running for the nomination in Utah's brand new First Congressional District, that is the Democratic-leaning district that is centered mostly on Salt Lake County, that was put in place by a judge last year. They met on the debate stage last night for the first and only televised debate that happened on Wednesday night. And let's break it down. Let's talk about what happened. The frontrunner going into Wednesday night's debate was Ben McAdams. He's a former congressman. He's a known quantity. He has the most name recognition. He has the most money. His campaign is built on the electability argument. He flipped a solidly Republican district, probably one of the most Republican districts to flip when he was first elected in 2018, when he defeated Mia Love by less than 1,000 votes. Joining him on the stage were three other candidates, all of them self-described progressives. You have State Senator Nate Blouin, you have Liban Mohamed, and Michael Farrell. And they had two jobs on Wednesday night. First of all, they had to find a way to make the case that Ben McAdams is not the right candidate for this district. But they also had to find a way to stand out from the other two. All three of them are running to McAdams' left in this race. All three of them are competing for the same pool of voters. And as I said, they had two jobs this evening. They had to find a way to try and stop McAdams from winning the nomination, but they also had to stop each other. McAdams didn't need to win the debate on Wednesday night. He just needed not to lose. None of his three rivals had the kind of breakout performance that it's going to take for them to jump ahead of the other two and present themselves as, a direct threat to McAdams. McAdams just needed not to have any major stumbles. But let's go over what happened during the debate. There were a lot of attacks against McAdams, which is to be expected. He's the front runner. They have to make the case against him. But also, there were some dust-ups between the other candidates, specifically between Nate Blouin and Liban Mohamed, and we had to do some fact checking after that. So let's get into it. I've made it pretty clear that I don't think the product put out by the Utah Debate Commission really does anything to inform voters. And I don't think that what happened on the debate stage dispelled that at all. The format is really, really bad. It's restrictive. Candidates are only given a minute to answer questions. But let's get to what happened on the stage last night. They started off with a question about why each of the candidates would be the best representative. And Liban Mohamed had a kind of a strange answer when he said what the top issue he thought voters were focusing on ahead of this primary election.
The number one issue that I'm hearing from voters: Americans and our government need to begin focusing on our diplomacy abroad, and most importantly, our own dignity right here at home.
A little bit later in the debate, there was a question about affordability, and Mohamed then said that was the top issue he was hearing about from voters. So it was kind of an uneven performance from Mohamed on stage. I thought one of the best questions of the night came early in the debate from moderator Max Roth of Fox 13. He asked them about immigration, and all four of them gave pretty good answers.
As a son of immigrants who experiences what it's like to deal with the rhetoric of the current leadership that we have, Donald Trump and this MAGA movement, specifically coming after Somali Americans. My parents were born in Somalia. They immigrated here and they sought asylum and were welcomed by our beautiful Utah community and treated with such dignity. Dignity that feels like it's being stripped away from us today. Our neighbors are immigrants. Some of them are our family members. What we need to do is this: abolish ICE and build an immigration system that is rooted in our shared humanity. We need to make sure that we have pathways to citizenship for all of our undocumented neighbors.
Let me start by saying that I would oppose and use every tool at my disposal to stop the ICE detention center that's proposed for our backyard. This detention center will be a scar on the face of Utah, and we must stop it. But it doesn't stop there. We also must get ICE out of our American cities. We must hold ICE accountable. Of course, that starts with things like body cams, removing the masks, requiring warrants, requiring due process, but that is the bare minimum. And look, our challenges with immigration is bigger than just ICE. It's about reforming Customs and Border Patrol, the Department of Homeland Security.
We have been talking about our broken immigration system for at least 5-6 decades. We need to abolish ICE, fight the detention center, Topaz 2.0. We need to take the funding that is going to ICE right now, and we need to put it into hiring hundreds of immigration judges, because that's the holdup. The people in D.C. don't want the process to work. They're not hiring judges. They're letting people linger in fear and in silence. So ending that, banning masks for any federal officials, and ending qualified immunity for any agents or officers that violate the law. They cannot be hiding behind this fake shield anymore.
I agree with others on this stage that we need to abolish ICE. On day one, I will be performing oversight. If we see this detention facility, which I am committed to fighting as hard as I can against, I will be out there on the first day of my term, surveying that facility and making sure that people are being treated humanely, because that system has propagandized far too many, and it needs to go in a very different direction.
Right after that, Roth asked a question that really made me roll my eyes because it was kind of strange. This is what he asked.
We're talking about water and the Great Salt Lake, crucial issues in Utah. President Trump's proposed budget includes $1 billion in funding for restoration of the Great Salt Lake. As a member of Congress, would you support that specific budget item? Why or why not? And what can we do with money to ensure that water gets to the lake?
I don't know what he was trying to get to. Like, any of them are going to say they would oppose the $1 billion to save the Great Salt Lake, because all of them in their answers acknowledge that that is an existential issue for the people of Utah. So at least the way that Roth worded that question wasn't great, but all the candidates figured out kind of what he was trying to ask, and they were able to work off of that. I think the best answer to that question came from Michael Farrell, who did get off a pretty good line that at least caused some chuckles in the audience. I thought it was pretty funny.
I would happily work with Donald Trump to bring in more funding for the Great Salt Lake. We could call it the Great Trump Lake if he wants to save it. I don't care.
And then Roth followed that up with another really strange question. The way it was worded was really odd. I think he was trying to get at the issue of affordability, but just watch this.
In Utah, the cost of housing is getting further out of reach. So imagine a young teacher in your district calls your office, you pick up the phone, and she has been priced out of 3 different apartments this year and is considering leaving Utah. You have just a few minutes with her on the phone. What do you tell her? And what is the first call you make after getting off that phone?
It was kind of awkward. It was worded strangely, and it kind of threw all the candidates off. So it wasn't a great question. I don't even know how you answer a question like that. And again, it was framed in a very, very strange manner. When they started talking about healthcare, that's when things started to get a little spicy on stage between the candidates. It all started off when Liban Mohamed took a shot at Nate Blouin for his record of not passing anything in the Utah State Legislature, even though he was there for 4 years in the state Senate.
The reason Nate Blouin is not able to pass a bill is not because progressives don't get bills done. There's many progressives that get them done in Utah. The reason is because of his character.
So Bluen fires back at Mohamed, and he makes this allegation.
I'm having a hard time understanding how folks who are watching this debate will trust someone like Liban Mohamed, who has actually worked in the past for the same lobbying firm that is pushing Kevin O'Leary's data center into our backyard.
Now, there's not a lot of context, but what Bluen is trying to do here is tie Mohamed to the lobbying firm that is working with Kevin O'Leary on the hyperscale data center that was just approved in Box Elder County. That's a really controversial issue, and it's caused a lot of pushback from the public. So Bluen is trying to tie Mohamed to that. Mohamed comes back and says that that's false. A little bit later in the debate, Bluen adds a little more information. He names Lincoln Shirts, who is the lobbyist. His firm, Lincoln Hill Partners, is working for Kevin O'Leary on that Box Elder data center. And then Mohamed comes back and says that he never worked for Lincoln Shirts.
I've never, ever worked for Lincoln Shirts. A lie. His character demonstrated.
Now, that denial by Mohamed is not 100% the truth. Mohamed did work for a company called State House Partners, which was a lobbying shop that was opened by Lincoln Shirts. Mohamed worked there from 2020 until 2022. When I asked him about this, he said he did do some work for another one of the people involved in that company, State House Partners, and he worked for Intermountain Healthcare. State House Partners really doesn't exist anymore. It's changed its name. Lincoln Shirts sold it and then created his current lobbying firm, which is Lincoln Hill Partners. So this is kind of a bad faith argument trying to tie Mohamed to the data center simply because he worked for someone who is now lobbying for the data center. Typically, when a candidate makes an allegation like this against another candidate, especially on a debate stage, you would think that his campaign would be ready to go to provide some background material. Sometimes they even provide it right as the debate starts or right before the debate, so reporters can be ready if they need to ask any follow-up questions. That didn't happen here. Linking Mohamed to the data center, which has become a political hot potato, you would think that they would be ready to back that up. They weren't, but as we did a little digging, or at least as I did a little digging, that's sort of a bad faith argument because Liban's association with Lincoln Shirts appears to be just tangential, and that it was for another client, and it happened years ago, years before anybody was even talking about these large data centers. Ben McAdams has also been caught up in the data center issue in recent days when he filed his financial disclosures with Congress, which every candidate is required to do. It showed that he does own some stock in a data center project in southern Utah, and the candidates did attack him from the stage for that. He explained afterwards during the media scrum, during the media Q&A, that he did some consulting work on this project, helped them transition to some renewable energies, and he was paid in stock because it was a startup. He also said that those stocks are not liquid, so he can't sell them. He can't do anything with them. One of the most consistent attacks of the night was against Nate Blouin and his record of not passing a single bill during the 4 years that he was in the Utah State Senate. He famously didn't get anything passed, and there are a number of reasons for that, but it was a consistent attack line during the night. I think Liban Mohamed had probably one of the funniest lines when he said this about Bluen.
Performative folks like Nate Blouin, who says the right things but has never passed a bill in the history of his tenure of the entire legislature. Actually, statistically, the most ineffective person since Utah has existed.
McAdams also attacked Bluen for not getting anything done, as he has done consistently throughout this campaign. It's pretty clear that McAdams sees Bluen as his main rival for winning the primary next month in June, and so most of his attack lines were directed at Bluen. Now, I've complained a lot about the format of these debates. I don't think they do a very good job of informing the public when you only have a minute to answer a question, and then if somebody calls you out on stage, you get some time to issue a rebuttal up to 30 seconds. A lot of the times last night it was about 15 seconds, and it really just disrupts the flow of the debate. As the front runner, McAdams was the target of a lot of attacks from the other candidates, and because of that, he was given time to respond, sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes 15 seconds, a little extra speaking time. And McAdams did get off a pretty good zinger about that towards the end of the debate.
I'd like to thank my fellow candidates for all so generously giving me extra time on the stage tonight.
There are three progressive candidates in the race, or self-described progressives: Bluen, Mohamed, and Farrell. And coming into the debate, Nate Blouin said that he was going to issue a poll or conduct a poll to see who the leading progressive candidate was. And he said that if he was not the leading progressive candidate, he would drop out of the race, and he called on the other candidates to do that. Now, the other candidates, Michael Farrell, Liban Mohamed, they rejected that, as you would expect them to. This is just a stunt by Bluen. The only reason he does this is because he knows he's going to win that poll, especially because he's the one who's commissioning it, and he's probably got the best name recognition out of all three of them. Now, something really strange happened after the debate was over. Usually when these things happen, there is a candidate Q&A. They bring all the candidates back out on stage to take questions from reporters for 10 minutes. The first part of Liban Mohamed's Q&A was not on the live stream. If you go back and watch the live stream, the replay of the live stream, it's not there. And it's really interesting because Mohamed made a pretty startling accusation with that call to drop out of the race. He accused Nate Blouin of basically exercising white privilege. Watch this.
We won the Democratic Convention by 51%, and for a reason. We have a track record of integrity and results. We have a candidate over here that's exercising what is clearly white privilege. It is white privilege to call for the person who won first place as an individual who was in third place to step aside.
That's a pretty shocking accusation, but it's not part of the live stream. I've reached out to KUED and the Hinckley Institute, who was in charge of this debate as part of the Utah Debate Commission, but it was not there, and I haven't received an answer back as to why this wasn't part of the live stream. As I said before, Ben McAdams entered this debate as the front runner in this race, and I think he exited the debate still as the front runner. Nothing really happened to change that. He remained calm in the face of attacks from his opponents, which is all he really needed to do. And none of the other candidates, Bluen, Mohamed, Farrell, had the kind of breakout performance that you would need in order to become the main rival to McAdams. Now, ballots start hitting mailboxes next week. So this was the last chance for all of them to make their closing argument, essentially make their closing argument to voters, because they're going to start returning those ballots next week. Even though McAdams is seen as the front runner, that doesn't mean that he's a lock to win the primary. There are four candidates. You don't need to win a majority. Whoever wins this is probably going to win with a plurality. Someone could win with as little as 35% of the vote. We've seen that before back in 2020 when Blake Moore was first elected to Congress. He was in a four-way primary in the Republican primary in that congressional district, and he won with just under 33% of the vote. So it's entirely likely that whoever wins this nomination, whoever wins the primary election next month on June 23rd, is going to win with less than a majority. Maybe somebody gets close to 40%, but with four candidates on the ballot, anything can happen. Whoever wins the June 23rd primary is most likely going to be elected to Congress in November. But this district is not a Democratic stronghold. It is rated D+12 by the nonpartisan Cook Political Report. And had it been in place for the 2024 presidential election, this district would have gone for Kamala Harris by 24 points. So the Democrat, whoever wins this election on June 23rd, is going to be heavily favored. But when you look at the makeup of the district, only a quarter of the voters in this new district are registered Democrats. Most of them, about 35%, are independents, and then about 34% are registered Republicans. So it's not a lock, but it's highly likely that whoever wins this nomination on June 23rd is going to be the next member of Congress.